Hello everyone, this is Dr. Meyer here with a video for you on altered dominant chords. Let's get started. The best place to start, of course, is with a musical example. So let's listen to this piano etude beginning from Maria Szymanowska's book of exercises. Okay, that went by a little quickly, but luckily we have the score to see what's going on. So, based on our key signature and what we just heard, we are in E flat major. What is this F sharp doing here? It would be a part of the dominant chord as the fifth, but an F sharp affects our figures, making that chordal fifth sharp instead of the F natural that we expect there. Let's look a little closer. The dominant in E flat is, of course, a B flat 7, and if we alter the fifth, we would then have to alter our label B flat 7 sharp 5 with an augmented triad on the bottom. This is a way that dominant chords can be altered in Western art music and other musics. Okay, so let's see again. Let's have a listen and actually see what the effect is of this F sharp. The augmented fifth between B flat and F sharp gives an uneasy and sort of tense effect. But when that F sharp resolves to G, we feel a sense of proper resolution or landing. So let's dig a little bit more into this compositional tactic, see what's going on. Altering the dominant chord really just involves the fifth of the chord, or scale degree 2. This can be accomplished by raising or lowering that pitch for an aesthetic sound on an otherwise functional harmony. The chords may or may not contain a seventh factor, doesn't have to, but the chromaticism is almost always going to resolve in the direction of the alteration, just as our F sharp did in the previous example. As I said, the dominant function remains the same, and we're just spicing up this chord with a singular pitch alteration to give it a little bit more tension and excitement to the harmony. As you can see below here on the score, your chord symbols and Roman numerals are going to reflect that alteration as well by adding a sharp or flat respectively to each symbol. If the chord is inverted, Roman numerals may have to reflect another interval being altered, as in our previous example, the third above the bass was chromatically altered sharp, so I wrote 6-5 sharp 3. Roman numerals are a little bit tricky, especially when these chords are inverted. Let's hear another example from Brahms's Unbewegte neue Luft. Our altered dominant comes here in the first measure, and it's in second inversion. The altered tone is actually in the bass, and is altered flat from our original key signature, so F natural becoming from that F sharp. The label that we're going to want to use, if we put that in root position, is B7 flat 5. Did you notice that you maybe heard this sonority somewhere else? That's right. The altered dominant with the fifth lowered is enharmonically the same as a French augmented sixth chord. However, this is not functioning or even spelled like an augmented sixth chord in this example. So we are going to label it as the dominant because it's prolonging function here at the beginning of the phrase. But I wanted to point this out because the notion of enharmonicism becomes a fascination for composers in this time. They like to use it to enact fun modulations to foreign keys, using the tendencies of these harmonies. So stay tuned for a deeper dive into that in later semesters, and I actually have a couple of videos about enharmonic modulation if you want to check those out. Well, let's return to the score. As expected, we're going to see that altered scale degree 2, this time resolving down in the direction of its alteration to scale degree 1. Just like in all of the instances, there's 4 here. What do you think? Does this help solidify the motionless, mild air that's being described by the text of the song? With this in mind and the alteration, listen once more. The possibilities for altered dominance happen in both major and minor keys, but I wanted to point out a few items about labeling as well as those possibilities before I give you an example to practice on your own. First of all, labeling. We want to make sure we're being as accurate as possible. And now we have more sharps and flats flying around in our labels, especially for our chord symbols. So you may have to use parentheses. That is the root of the chord, and the alteration of the chordal fifth can sometimes get confused. For example, I've put the sharp 5 and the flat 5 in parentheses so that the root of the chord G wouldn't be mistaken for G sharp or G flat in this case. Secondly, if you look to the bottom staff, you'll see that 5, 7, sharp 5 and 5, sharp 5 are actually not in the chart for minor mode altered dominance. This is because scale degree 2 in minor mode, if we raise it, it doesn't actually create a chromatic pitch, but rather scale degree 3, which already exists there in minor mode. So it's not very spicy to alter a pitch that's already in the mode. It's somewhat rare for composers to use this iteration of the altered dominant. It doesn't pack as much punch as the chords that feature actual chromatic pitches. Now it's your turn to practice. See if you can spot the dominant that is altered in Dvorak's waltz opening here. Once you've found it, in what direction is the alteration? And how does it resolve? Pause the video after the recording if you need more time. You should have found the second and fourth measures of the first system featuring an altered dominant of E7 sharp 5. Notice how this chord is acting as a tonic prolongation at the beginning of the phrase, but it's just a little bit spicier than normal. See also that our tone of alteration, B sharp, is resolving upward to C sharp in the highest voice, just as we expected it to do. If you were an overachiever and continued your analysis, you may have spotted the chord in the last measure here. This is a chord of extension, one where the extension of ninth, in this case, has been lowered from the original key signature. This practice isn't as common in Western art music, but does happen a lot in American jazz harmonies. So if you haven't watched the video on extended chords yet, make sure you head over there and have a look for info on more harmonies like this. For now, we're going to label it 5 flat 9 and E flat 9 to represent what we see on the score. Still functioning as a dominant here. Listen to this excerpt once more now that we've talked through the analysis. What did we learn in this video? Well, We learned that composers in the 19th century and beyond began to experiment with new sounds while staying in the confines of tonal function. Dominant seventh chords have their chordal fifths altered up or down a semitone to create a dramatic effect. We are going to see this chromaticism resolve in the direction of its alteration, sharp going up and flat going down, respectively. Minor mode's going to be less likely to feature that 5-7 sharp 5 because of the enharmonic equivalence, which lessens the dramatic effect of the alteration. If you want to know more about alterations and extensions, again, be sure to check out those videos on extensions. The altered dominant seventh chords was sort of a precursor to the diverse and interesting harmonies found later in traditions like American jazz. And we're going to explore that together in class and hopefully future videos. Thanks for watching. That's all for now.